Hello there, this is Michael Buckoff from BetterTOEFLScores.com. Today, I want to talk about reading skills. Now, if you're taking the TOEFL test, you're going to get a lot of it. A reading section, reading passages in the speaking, and reading during the writing section. So this video is for TOEFLers whose reading score is between approximately 15 and 21 points. The information I'm sharing with you comes directly from the Educational Testing Service website at www.TOEFL.org. There's three basic things that you need to do to improve your reading skills. There's three important things. Number one, read as much and as often as possible in English. It's simple. If you want to be a good soccer player, you have to play soccer. You got to practice. If you want to be a good reader, you need to read as much as possible in English. Read a variety of topics. You can read non-academic and academic materials. You can read about subjects which are or are not interesting to you, but begin reading today. Write basic questions that test your understanding of the text that you're reading. Write questions and answers about the first paragraph, and then you can guess what you think will be discussed in the next paragraph, and then the next one, and on and on and on. Use your knowledge of grammar to understand difficult sections of a reading passage. Try to think carefully about the relationship between independent and dependent clauses. Remember, independent clauses contain main ideas and dependent clauses contain support ideas. For example, if I give you this sentence and I say, the man who is a teacher is coming over today, the most important thing you want to remember there is the independent clause. The man is coming over today. Now, who is a teacher? That's a dependent clause. That represents support information. So it's important for you to understand the relationship between the main ideas and the support ideas. Now, look for words that maybe refer back to information either in a previous sentence in that paragraph or maybe something in an earlier paragraph. Words like they, it, he or she, even relative clause pronouns, things like that, maybe which, who, whom, whose. These are important words. So if I said something like this, if I said the dog whose leg was injured was taken to a hospital, if you look at the word whose, you know that means the dog or the dog's leg. So it's important to make sure you know what these pronouns refer to. It helps you understand the relationship of ideas in reading passages. And guess what? The TOEFL will test your understanding of these things. Now, with this first point, the last suggestion I want to give you is work with a reading partner. Have you ever done that? Let's say that you got a friend, you guys get together, maybe he reads a certain magazine, maybe you're reading a newspaper article. So when you're reading the newspaper article, you write certain questions. When your friend's reading the magazine, he writes certain questions, and then you exchange and you answer the questions that he wrote for his reading passage, and then he answers the questions that you wrote for your reading passage. This is very, very good, and sometimes two heads are better than one. When you have a question, maybe about a reading passage, you have your partner that you can talk to. Here's tip number 2. Are you ready? You need to expand your vocabulary. This is absolutely critical. You need to have good vocabulary. And not only vocabulary, but you need to increase your vocabulary in many subjects because you're going to have to read about a lot of different topics at the university. And the TOEFL will test your vocabulary knowledge in many fields, such as history, sociology, psychology, math, chemistry, and so on. It's good that you have vocabulary in all of those areas. Now, if you have a textbook, like a psychology textbook, for example, go to the back, and usually there's like a glossary or a definition section where it lists and defines all of the concepts and the words in that book that are important to the understanding of that book. It's a good idea to read some of those glossaries to see what those words are. Now, you need to develop a system for studying new words. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. It's important that you have a system. In your system, you need to develop what's called note cards. If you've downloaded my 1700 vocabulary list of words, you know that I encourage you to use note cards to help learn these words. So you should write each word on a note card. On one side of the card, you put the word. On the other side, you put the definition, the sample sentence, maybe some synonyms, some antonyms, what part of speech it is, and so on. Now, it's important to write the context. Write maybe, like I said, a sample sentence which actually uses the word. You can group the words according to topic or meaning, and you can study the words as a list of related words. For example, you might create a vocabulary list of words that relate to science. You might create a vocabulary list that relates to history, chemistry, and so on. For just basic English things, you might develop a vocabulary a list of cards that deal with cars or household items or food and so on. You get the picture. Now, study your vocabulary maybe. If you want to make a list of opposites and even synonyms, this can be really, really important. Opposites are simply words with opposite meanings. For example, if you put the word hot, you know the word cold. Angry, happy, rough, smooth. These are all important. Expand your vocabulary by analyzing the parts of words. You can take a word and break it into its certain parts. You can take a word like aspect, for example. Spect kind of means to look at. How about the word diction, like dictation? Dict actually means say or speak. So if you study roots, it can help you understand the meanings of some words. If you study prefixes, things like unhappy, maybe something like re as in rewind. If you know some of the prefixes, that can help you guess at the meanings of some words, and even suffixes. Sometimes a suffix will actually change the part of speech of a word. You might take a word like, let's say, expect. We know that expect is a verb. I think spect is kind of like see. But if you have shun, expectation, it now changes it from a verb to a noun. It's a pretty good idea to have some understanding of suffixes and how they work, and particularly how they change the word from one part of speech to another. Because remember, on the TOEFL, you have some speaking and some writing tasks, and you have to be good with your word forms. So this is excellent, excellent practice. Use the context to guess the meanings of unknown words. So when you're reading a college textbook, if you see when a difficult word is defined, try to look for examples. Sometimes the writer will give examples after the difficult word, and that helps you understand the meaning of the word. So whatever you do, do not stop when there's a word you don't know. That is the worst possible strategy for your reading. So look for definitions. You can look at other words and structures around the unknown word that might help you understand it. Use resources to help you study vocabulary. For example, use an English dictionary so that you can get correct meaning and word usage. I think I would suggest not to use a foreign language dictionary, a translation dictionary. If you're using a translation dictionary, for example, Spanish English, Korean English, Chinese English, German English, you're not ready for the TOEFL test, trust me. You need to use an English dictionary for a period of months so you get used to thinking in the new language, and then, my fellow TOEFLer, you will be ready to take the TOEFL test. There's other resources on the internet where you can get word calendars. There's even websites where you can get new words sent to you every day. I'll give you one idea. Merriam-Webster, I think it's an online dictionary, merriam-webster.com. They will actually send you a new vocabulary word every day by email. So there are resources out there. As you expand your vocabulary, practice correct usage by making sentences with these new words. You can make the sentences by speaking them, which means orally construct these sentences, or you can write these sentences down. This is important to help you understand or remember the meaning, and also to help you practice the usage of the word. For example, let's say that you hear the word expectation, and you know that expect is a verb, and you learn the form expectation, so then you're going to try to say something like this. There is the expectation in the university that you can speak fluently and you can write competently. These are expectations for incoming freshman students at different universities and all over the United States. So practice the correct usage is very important. If you write the sentences down, if possible, have a teacher or an ESL specialist or a tutor look at your sentences and check for proper grammar and proper usage. Review these new words on a regular basis so you can remember them. So remember, vocabulary is a never-ending process of studying, reviewing, relearning, reacquainting yourself with new words. So once you make your vocabulary lists, by using 3x5 or 4x6 inch note cards, you'll need to study those note cards for several months, and you might consider developing a system of maybe 1,500 to 2,000 different new words, and you begin studying these words in your note cards regularly, day to day. This is very, very powerful technique to help you improve your vocabulary usage, which also helps improve your reading, which helps you get higher score on the TOEFL test. It's true. Okay, my third point. To do well on the reading, you need to understand the organization of academic texts, which means you need to understand how the structure of that reading test works. So, read a passage from beginning to end. Now remember, the TOEFL reading passages can be about 800 words long, so it's a good idea to practice reading 800 word or longer academic texts. Look for main ideas, look for supporting details. So pay attention between the relationships of the details and the main ideas. So a question that I asked my TOEFL students today, we went into our TOEFL book, we looked at two different paragraphs. First of all, I asked them, how does the writer organize the information beginning with the first, second, third, and fourth paragraphs, and how does that relate to the title? And then I asked them the same question about the other reading passage. And then I said, how do both writers organize the information? What similar things are they doing to organize their ideas? Essentially, I was asking my students to identify the thesis and the supporting points of the reading passages and to show how the writer organizes that information in a way that's easy to understand. Now, it's important that you recognize different styles of organization, and you'll find different styles in different articles. And this helps you understand how the article is actually structured. Now, the best way to do this is to pay attention to certain connecting words or transitions. These types of words signal specific relationships. Let me give you some examples. Sometimes a reading passage will explain steps in a process. In this case, you'll see words like first, second, next, and finally. Now, other cases, a reading passage might explain what's called cause-effect type relationships. It gives reasons. For example, today, in my TOEFL class, they're reading a passage about the bald eagle. Now, the first paragraph discussed that in the 50, 60 years ago, the number of bald eagles or pairs of bald eagles in the United States was 75,000 pairs. They said by 1960 there were only 450 pairs of bald eagles. That was kind of the first paragraph. The second paragraph talked about why the bald eagle was decreasing or dying out in alarming numbers. But the third paragraph talked about how to solve the problem and what was done to increase the population of these bald eagles. So that was kind of like a cause-effect type situation. Now you also see words like because or since. Maybe as a result, you might see so, therefore, hence, thus. Some types of reading passages might be showing examples. For example, such as, for instance, case in point, and so on. And remember what I said earlier, sometimes you can understand vocabulary by looking at examples of things which come after the vocabulary word. Some reading passages are structured as compare and contrast. You might see words like in contrast, on the other hand, nonetheless, conversely, but, still, things like that. You might see similar words like in the same manner, similarly, likewise, to signal comparison type relationships. Even words like restatements of information. Sometimes something will restate something that's earlier explained in the reading passage. You might say in other words, or that is, to say that. You see words like that. Even pay attention to things like conclusion or in conclusion or to sum up. In the final analysis, maybe. These help you understand the structure of a reading passage. Now, what do you do now? There's maybe a few other things I want to point out, and these things still relate to the third point, which is study the organization of academic texts. You can outline a reading passage to test your understanding of the structure of a reading passage. What you do is you begin grouping paragraphs that address the same concept. Pay attention to the key words in one paragraph and how they relate to the main ideas or key words of another paragraph. Write one sentence summarizing the paragraphs that discuss the same idea. Now also look at connections between sentences. Look at how the end of one sentence relates to the beginning of the next sentence. Think about the connection between the ideas of the two sentences. Combine the sentences using appropriate transition words to show the relationship of ideas. And finally, once you've done that, it's now time to write a summary of the entire passage. Remember, when you're writing a summary, do not give your own opinion, but you can state the thesis or main point of the reading passage, and then you identify some of the main supporting points that relate to that idea. Don't worry about the details, just cover more of the gist or the main points of what you have read. So these are some good ideas, and these things can definitely help you improve your reading abilities, especially if your reading score is between 15 and 21 points. So let me recap what I said in the video. Number 1, read as much as possible in English. Number 2, expand your vocabulary knowledge continually. And then point number 3, study how academic texts are organized and study the structure of reading passages. For more information, you can go to www.michaelbuckoff.com.